Do not give in to 10,000 years of darkness. You are the Avatar.
Why would Luna do this? Why now? You're all right. You're all right.
Whatever you've got planned, forget it. I'm the Doctor. I'm 904 years old. I'm from the planet Gallifrey in the constellation of Castabras. I am the oncoming storm, the bringer of darkness, and you are basically just a rabbit, aren't you?
Welcome back to Unrepentant Geeking, the show where nobody knows your name, and honestly, you kind of prefer it that way, don't you? Sadly, I had to skip last week's episode due to a number of factors, not least of which was me completely losing my voice for 4 whole days. Believe me, no one was more frustrated by that than me, so to make up for it to everyone, and in honor of Thanksgiving, for those not aware, Thanksgiving and the Jewish holiday Hanukkah fall on the same day this year, and I happen to celebrate both, so yay! I'll be doing a somewhat longer episode this week. As for the focus of this bonus-length episode, I'm once again turning my attention to the realm of TV, where some momentous happenings have been occurring of late in terms of geekdom, with shows ending for now, beginning again, and celebrating all out. Because I like to do things oddly around here, let us begin with the ending, then head to the middle for the beginning, and end with the middle. Trust me, it'll all make sense once I'm done. So, let's talk about The Legend of Korra Season 2 finale, and indeed, the season as a whole. It's no secret that Book 2, Spirits, has been a divisive set of episodes, and I won't deny there were some uneven moments throughout the first half of the season, particularly in terms of pacing. Still, with the 2-part season finale having now aired, everything that the creators were attempting with Book 2 has come into full focus, and I think the season works as an overall story, messy parts and all. In particular, I want to address the issue of our titular lead, Korra. Many of the worst criticisms this season have been lobbied in her direction, and I feel the finale helped show the writers knew what they were doing all along. Remember, Korra is a young woman who has spent nearly her entire life sheltered from the larger world. It seems likely that Team Avatar The Next Generation marks the first friends her own age she's ever had. And furthermore, she's coming off the most emotionally devastating period of her life. Yes, she got back her bending at the end of Book 1, but the emotional trauma that let that Deus Ex Machina happen did not just go away simply because she can now manipulate the elements again. People don't work like that. And indeed, is it really so hard to see why in the face of such painful experiences, she might revert to bad habits as a defensive mechanism? Especially since essentially she only managed to quote-unquote win last season thanks to sheer luck and outside interference. To say nothing of the fact that our worst aspects are not exactly something we can just overcome at the drop of a hat. They are something we will likely struggle with our entire lives. Korra has essentially been prevented from going out into the world and gaining the experiences she needed in order to be capable of growing and maturing into full adulthood. It's not an accident that she literally reverted to childhood earlier this season, and she's also constantly been struggling with her place in not just the world at large, but also in a cycle of events going back thousands of years that she's never fully understood. In short, Korra spent the first half of Book 2 as the emotional equivalent of a wounded animal. And what is it that wounded animals do but lash out at everything around them? Only by learning the history of her role as the Avatar and confronting the truths about her own nature could Korra heal and finally reach the point where she could achieve apotheosis. This was her arc for Book 2, and in retrospect, it's a powerful one that climaxes with Korra no longer simply mindlessly reacting, and instead making conscious, thoughtful decisions as befits her role in the world. And so, while Deus Ex Machina does once again rear its head in Book 2, this time around it feels far more earned as a result. The fact that this all occurs alongside the best action sequences available on TV today, animated or otherwise, and with music that continues to be as nuanced as it is powerful, only makes what the creators of the show have accomplished all the more impressive. The second season finale of Legend of Korra has indeed raised the bar so high that I'm left wondering how on earth the show's ever going to be able to top itself in the seasons to come. Yet I very much look forward to seeing it try in the months and years ahead. Ultimately, while the journey to this finale was not always as smooth as would have been desirable, overall, Book 2 of Legend of Korra gets far more right than it does wrong. What may have been a frustrating weekly experience at times will end up playing out much better in the larger chunks or even single sitting that is the viewing approach many take towards TV shows post-airing these days. In the end, this was a great finale to a good season, and I remain convinced that in the long term, history will be kinder to Book 2 once all the frustrations with its weekly release schedule have long since fallen away. Our middle subject for review is none other than the beginning of a new season of My Little Pony: Friendship is Magic. And I can already hear some of your eyes rolling, but hey, it's my show, and as such, I review what I like. I will say, seeing as how we are just at the start of Season 4, I'll be keeping things fairly brief, especially since I'll have more opportunity to go in depth regarding adorable, colorful ponies down the line. Overall, I really enjoyed this opener, and found it to be a strong start for what will hopefully be an equally strong season. Perhaps the most important job these two episodes had in context of the larger series was assuring a wary fanbase that yes, Twilight Sparkle was going to remain her adorable self even in the face of becoming a princess. And on that front, the show succeeded with flying colors. Best Pony remains as wonderfully neurotic as ever, and gaining wings to go along with her horn has not stripped her of her most defining traits, both good and bad. Indeed, if anything, Twilight's new role has only opened up more possibilities than ever, and I'm excited to see the series introduce its first real ongoing season-long story arc with such gusto. I also cannot let the opportunity pass without commenting on just how good-looking Friendship is Magic has become. Not that the show was ever poorly animated, mind you, but the level of growth across the board between the series premiere and these episodes is simply remarkable. The difference, appropriately enough, is as obvious as night and day. The increased focus on such aspects as lighting, camera work, and more varied and subtle facial animations has really paid off for the series, and it also points to just how passionate the creators remain towards Friendship is Magic even 4 seasons in. Overall, episodes 1 and 2 of My Little Pony: Friendship is Magic stand as entertaining additions to a series that never fails to leave me grinning from ear to ear. Finally, we come to the end of this week's episode via the middle, which in this case is the middle chapter of the final trilogy of Matt Smith's run on Doctor Who. First up, let us appropriately begin with the first Doctor that is, and talk briefly about an adventure in time and space. This special could have easily been a dull piece of work, especially considering that while there was plenty of drama surrounding the early years of Doctor Who, it was more in the nature of small-scale occurrences as opposed to the more sensationalistic material that often fills and drives the docudrama. Yet Adventures turned what could have been a weakness into a strength by narrowing its focus largely to Doctor Who's original producer Verity Lambert and original Doctor performer William Hartnell. The latter in particular, as played by veteran David Bradley, gets some remarkably moving material, and it's especially touching to see just how much the series came to mean to the actor who helped first make it such a success. It's long been an acknowledged fact that when it comes to period pieces, BBC is the best in the business, and Adventure only helps shows why. There are some truly lovely visual moments in this film that both took me by surprise and made me fall all the more in love with it. A much talked about moment near the end of an adventure is of course pure fiction by its very nature, but it's also simply perfect, and the right choice was made in including it. While not a perfect film by any means, I wish for example we could have gotten a bit more on the process of developing some of the key aspects of Who, overall, An Adventure in Time and Space is a wonderful tribute and a perfect addition to the 50th anniversary celebration of the adventures of a man and his wondrous blue box. And now we come at last to the Day of the Doctor. I should preface this by saying that unlike some, I thoroughly enjoyed the last season of Doctor Who. I thought the first half did a great job closing out the story of the Ponds, while the second introduced Clara just as adroitly. Was there the occasional weaker moment along the way? Sure. Did I love every single episode of the season? No. And did some plot points end up not paying off as fully as I would have preferred? Yes. Then again, those are things I could say about every single season of Doctor Who I've ever watched, and do not, in my opinion, point to an appreciably noticeable drop in quality for the series. I've been a big fan of Stephen Moffat's tenure on the show from the start, and that remains just as true now as ever. However, even with all that being said, The Day of the Doctor makes for one hell of a high watermark for the series, and may just stand as Moffat's best work in his entire history with Doctor Who. Considering said history includes such brilliance as Blink, The Silence in the Library / Forest of the Dead duology, The Girl in the Fireplace, and the best Ninth Doctor story, The Empty Child, that's saying something, I know. And yet, that's just how good The Day of the Doctor really was. There's so much I could say about this special that I could easily fill another hour talking about it alone, but I'll try to restrain myself to a more reasonable length of time. The character of the Doctor is a special one, and here was a story that was able to express why in a potent and powerful manner. The Doctor always changes, and yet the Doctor always remains the same. Faces come, faces go. One set of quirks and behavioral patterns are swapped out for another, but ultimately the Doctor is always the Doctor, which is to say someone who wants to help so very badly. And yet, in the course of New Who, the Doctor has also been a character who must continually question himself and his motivations. Do not misunderstand me, I'm not complaining about this. And indeed, I think it's been a part of the character from the beginning, and the modern run only happens to be more explicit and upfront about it. The Doctor is no perfect shining hero, in other words, and it's because of those flaws, not despite of them, that he is such an aspirational figure. And at its core, that's what the Day of the Doctor is all about. How a good man becomes a great man when buoyed by the belief of others. It's not so much that the Doctor's companions keep him human, because he's not human. And instead, it would be better to say that they keep him honest. They make him realize that for all his greatness, he is still ultimately but a single being in a larger universe. And he needs that touch of humility, as the classic episode The Waters of Mars so aptly demonstrated. But at the same time, you just watch the Doctor run, and you just see how far he can go. He can run so far and so fast that what started as a retreat away from a painful past can eventually become a charge towards a brighter future. And really, the Day of the Doctor is about the Doctor's future as much as it is about celebrating his past. For after all, we can only really move forward once we've dealt with what is holding us back. In production terms, The Day of the Doctor is also a triumph, with director Nick Herman and his team doing remarkable work and producing near feature film level of visuals at times, and on a much smaller budget to boot. Rarely has Doctor Who been so fun on a purely visual level, and that goes for the wonderfully tweaked Zygon suits and plentiful Easter eggs scattered about as well. And kudos to Murray Gold for another winning score that more than matched the high standards he's maintained across the entirety of New Who. And then there's the acting. At this point, what more is there to be said about David Tennant and Matt Smith? And the legendary John Hurt naturally acquitted himself just as well. Indeed, it's thanks in large parts to his performance that the War Doctor, in a scant amount of time relatively speaking, managed to nonetheless still come across as fully developed as any of the incarnations of the Doctor that have come before him. While it would probably never happen, as much because of rights issues as anything else, were Big Finish to ever want to give the War Doctor a few audio plays of his own, I for one would relish such an occurrence. Appropriately enough, the Day of the Doctor has two hearts, and while one of them is Hurt, the other is Jenna Coleman, who continues her strong showing as the Doctor's latest traveling companion. For all the menacing aliens, crazy time travel antics, and over-the-top heroics, ultimately, the Day of the Doctor is a character piece, whose finale rests heavily on Coleman's character, and particularly her relationship and faith in the Doctor. It is that faith that ultimately convinces the Doctor to make a seemingly impossible choice, and Coleman sells the hell out of the moment, no pun intended, when the time comes. Along similar lines, Billie Piper as the Moman in Bad Wolf's Clothing also plays a similar role for the War Doctor, and she performs her heart out throughout the Day of the Doctor, giving perhaps her best performance in Who to date. And I say that as someone who was never a Rose Piper basher either. And indeed, I hope that at least when it comes to the latter, the Day of the Doctor will silence some of the more nastily vehement trolls out there. Overall, the Day of the Doctor was a triumph worthy of Doctor Who's 50th anniversary. It managed to both honor the past while setting the stage for the future, and did so while creating an episode of TV that was highly entertaining in its own right. Some may quibble about the changes in status quo the special introduces into the series, but then Doctor Who has never been a franchise to stand still for too long. As with the Doctor himself, change is the name of the game. And I, for one, am excited to see where things go from here following these latest developments in the life of our favorite Time Lord. Even more so than the changeover from Tennant to Smith, we seem to be on the verge of a new era for Doctor Who. And it's also worth noting that the casting of Peter Capaldi as the 12th Doctor makes more sense than ever in the wake of the Day of the Doctor. But that is a subject of discussion for another time. For now, I want to leave things off with my highest possible recommendation to go check out An Adventure in Time and Space, the Night of the Doctor webisode, the Day of the Doctor, and the Five-ish Doctors reboot, in that order, if you've not already done so. That last one in particular is a hilarious half-hour featuring a number of familiar faces and headlined by Peter Davison, Colin Baker, and Sylvester McCoy. It's a perfect comedic capper to the Doctor's 50th, and a good reminder to never take the series or ourselves too seriously. And so I end things this week with one of my favorite Doctor Who quotes. There are worlds out there where the sky is burning and the sea's asleep, and the rivers dream. People made of smoke and cities made of song. Somewhere there's danger, somewhere there's injustice, and somewhere else the tea's getting cold. Come on everyone, we've got work to do.